Good. Okay, that's great. Now, I'd said, I think in the stuff I sent out is that as a sort of a focus for today, in order to in a way generate questions amongst you or comments or things to think about, what I'm actually doing is I'm looking at the 6-month review of Project 100, which is, some of you are involved with PTSD Resolution, is a project we've been running since the 1st of April. It's called Project 100 because the aim is to end up with 100 closed cases that went to an agreed planned ending. And actually, I just looking at the data yesterday, which has obviously moved on a bit since the 6-month review, we're at 40 already, which I'm thrilled with, So I'm hoping within another 12 months we'll easily get as far as the 100. So what I wanted to do was to review with you guys what we can see from the data, as much to show you about like a fairly rigorous use of Pragmatic Tracker to facilitate the data gathering, and to show you the sort of stories that are emerging from that I'm hoping we're going to have an awful lot to say with and write about later on. And then that'll take me 25 minutes, 20 minutes, 25 minutes, and then we'll just open up and have discussion and chat and questions and whatever you like. So if that's okay, we'll go like that. So what I'm going to do is just jump over to my screen here and get to the right place, hopefully, and view. The meeting is being recorded as well, because there's always human givens therapists who can't make it to any of the 3 times I offer, so then I can send them a recording afterwards. So that's just letting you know that. Okay, so hopefully you can see the screen. Stuart, can you, is there a slide on the screen? I can see you, but yeah, that's good. Okay. So if you were at the conference, you might remember me talking about the pig with an M on it. So this is my little friendly mnemonic to help the therapists to keep the headline things in their mind: measures, problems, interventions, and goals. This was now at the end of July. There's about, I think there's maybe 1 or 2 more therapists. There's about 44, 45 therapists involved. And at that point, there were 23 completed cases. There's in fact 40 now, but just too difficult to change all the slides. So coming to measures, first of all, this really, one of my aims with this session with you today is to make sure you understand exactly what the scatter chart is all about. So the scatter chart, when you go to your client list, you've got show these clients on the left-hand side, and down the bottom, you've got link button that clicks you to the scatter chart. And the scatter chart is very, very useful for you reviewing your own case list, whoever you've got in treatment with you at the moment. So I wanted to make sure you understood the elements of the scatter chart. Now, obviously here we're looking at more clients, but it'll be very similar for you. There's somebody else just coming in. Comes up there. That's handy. Right. So just talking about the different elements of this page, the scatter chart page. On the right side, you've got control over the measures that you want to look at. And each of these pretty colored dots represents one measure, not one client, one measure. And then we'll see other various sections. Now, what I wanted to explain is the line that goes up the middle of the scatter chart from the bottom left to the top right is what I call the no change line. So if a measure dot, if a dot representing a measure is on that line, it means that whatever the score was the first time that client came in to the most recent time that they've scored on that measure. So let's say it was a core 10 scored at the first session and then at the third session, and in both cases, the score was 15, that dot will be on this line. It represents the no change line. If, on the other hand, a client improves in treatment and the score went from 15 down to 10, the dot will be on the right side of the dotted line over here. Equally, if a dot is on the other side of the line, it means the score has deteriorated, it's got worse. So obviously, Ideally, one wants to be on the right side of the line. You would hope that as many dots as possible are to the right side of the line, and as few dots as possible are to the left side of the line. Now, in reviewing your own open case list, obviously, if you click on the scatter chart and you've got your clients who are in active treatment at the moment, any dots that are to the left side of that line, you'll be able to zoom in on you, and I'll show you in a sec. And you'll be able to think, well, what's going on with that client? Maybe what do I need to do something different? Do we need to have a conversation with the client about the lack of improvement? Do we need to discuss this in supervision or whatever it might be? So it's a way of alerting you to what's going on. So there's the improved ones down the right side of the dotted line, and there's the deteriorated ones. And obviously you hope to have a lot more on the improved to the deteriorated. So now we're looking at closed cases here at that point in July for PTSD resolution. So just picking up the different elements that you see, first of all, you can notice straight away the vast majority of the dots are to the right of the dotted line. And the ones even to the left are very close to the line. So at least it doesn't look like they've deteriorated too much in treatment. So that's good. Closed cases, and there, as you can see. Now, picking off what's going on over here on the left-hand side. So this information here is telling you the number of cases that are being represented on this screen, the number who arrived at a planned ending. So there's 100 in this case. There's 15 clients arrived at a planned ending, none unplanned. And 113 results, that's the number of measures that are represented here. And then the effect size, the easiest way to understand effect size is it's about magnitude of change. So if you think of a core measure going for the client going from 20 down to 5, that's an enormous effect. If on the other hand, you think of somebody going from 15 down to 13, that's a very small effect. And a general rule of thumb is an effect size of greater than 0.8 is a large effect. And as you can see here, this aggregate effect of all of these measures together is 0.99, which is a very large effect. Now, further down on the left-hand side, what you have is the average scores. So if you take these 15 clients and you add up all of those 15 core 10 scores and divide by 15, you get 19.4 as the score when they first came into treatment. Do the same thing again when they left treatment at the very last time they were measured, and it's 9. Now, it doesn't take much to figure out that a movement from 19.4 down to 9 is a colossal movement. It's a wonderful result. And the same thing follows through with all of the other measures. So that's the effect size, a large effect size, anything above 0.8, and all those different elements.
Well, can I jump in with a question?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, of course.
So you're saying that yeah, you might want to have conversations with those clients that are you know, not improving. Am I right in thinking you can put your cursor on a dot and it will take you to that or tell you who that person is?
You're ahead of me. You're ahead of me. I'm just about to show you that.
I'll leave you to it.
Okay, great. So what I've done now is I wanted to break this down a bit more for you to see these outstanding results that are emerging from a PTSD resolution. So now instead of the aggregate of several measures altogether, I'm just looking at one. So you can see the click over, and you can do this yourself with your own caseload on the scatter chart. You can control the measures like the chart control like this. And look at, for example, if you use core 10 as your sort of benchmark measure that you use all the time, you can study your cases based just on core 10. And as you can see here, all of the dots bar 1, in fact, are, well, that one is just on the line. The rest of them are all over here. Look at the huge change, 19.4 down to 9, and a massive effect size of almost 2, colossal. So that's fantastic. Move on to core 10 is a generic measure of distress overall. 10 questions, sort of distress orientated, general distress, bit of anxiety, bit of depression, bit of trauma, all thrown in there, functioning, everything thrown in there in the mix. GAD 7, on the other hand, IAPT measure, A standard IAP measure is a measure of anxiety. Once again, you can see the great results with this particular group of clients, just one over the other side of the line. And again, an enormous effective treatment, 2.35 in this case. So a huge reduction in anxiety for these group of clients. PHQ-9, the depression measure, IAPT again. This time, every single one of the dots is over the side of the line. And once again, a very large effect size of 1.7. So you're getting the hang of this now. PCL5. PCL5 is sort of, we're in that transition now to replace the impact of event scale with the PCL5. PCL5 is very similar, but it's used in IAPT. So the thing is that we need more and more data in a comparable format with IAPT services, because IAPT services publish their data all over the country all the time. So it means we've got something to compare with. And once again, it's a story repeating itself regardless of the measure we look at. Very, very good results, very large effect. PRN14. So this, of course, is where I get extremely interested, because PRN14 is, if you like, the measure that's most closely associated with the human Givens therapy model, if you like, because most of the elements of the PRN14 are around unmet needs and or functioning. And so to see a large movement on the PRN14 on the same clients as you're seeing movement on measures like Core 10, etc., is very, very good. Because what it's actually suggesting then is that the model, the human Givens model around needs and resources, as we see shifts taking place in the reduction in distress, in the reduction in anxiety and reduction in depression, what we're seeing in the PRN14 is the movement towards getting needs met in a better way, and general improvement in well-being. So that's very, very reassuring. The other little ones are to do with feedback. They tend to cluster down here. You're not looking for change in the same way on them. You're looking to get about alignment on feedback between the therapist and the client, and that's very good. I'm just going to jump past that. So that's M for measures. Obviously, the big chunk of what we're doing there is around measures, but talking about problems. So another important aspect of what, God bless these wonderful therapists, are being asked to do is to capture a word or phrase that represents the typical problem and problems that the clients are presenting with. Now, we all do this automatically in our first sessions. Typically, information gathering, it's all about what's brought you here into treatment. But this is like formalizing that process so that we can see, not just measuring these clients with standard instruments like Core 10, etc., but we can see, what did the clients say that brought them into treatment, number one. And number two, very importantly, how long have they been suffering with that problem for? So there's obviously a big difference between somebody suffering with the fear of being around people for 3 months or for 6 years or 10 years or whatever it might be. So we're able to capture all of that, and the therapists are doing that. You can see the other thing then, the chronicity aspect of it is very important, because this is about, well, how long have people been suffering with these problems for? And a huge number of them have been suffering with these. You can see lots of 5 to 10 years, 1 to 5 years, greater than 10 years, etc. So the duration. So I did a little word cloud of the typical words. It's very interesting to see this again with PTSD resolution clients. The big ones jumping out are anger and anxiety. And these are the themes that occur again and again and again amongst this client group. So that's P for problems, MPIG, I for interventions. So many of you use this facility within Pragmatic Tracker, and in fact will have contributed to helping getting it started in the first place. And so you'll know that this is in a treatment session, you can click on the different interventions you did on that particular session with the client. I've had very good feedback about this as being a very helpful thing, because you can quickly see when you go to your next session, you can look back at the last session and see very quickly what did you do. But here's the interesting thing: at this point in the 6 months down, looking at all the different 135 sessions of treatment, looking at all of the different places the therapists have dotted, I reorganized this in terms of the most frequently occurring. So these are the things that happen most often. The dot that's picked most frequently is reflective listening. And we go all the way down here to, there's 26 different interventions listed, and we get to molar memory, and there's nobody done any molar memory work as yet with the client group. Now you might expect, here's rewind, of course. So that's what, maybe 30 times or something like that it's been ticked. In 135 sessions of treatment, because obviously rewind might only arise once in a course of treatment with a client, once or maybe twice, whereas things like psychoeducation, reflective listening, reframing, and 7-11 breathing, in fact, is frequently done. So these are obviously techniques that are used more and more times over with the clients. So there's going to be so much to say about this in the fullness of time. Relating, for example, of huge interest will be looking at the association between gain in improvement and when, for example, the rewind was deployed. So in a given client, maybe going between session 2 and 3, if they had a rewind at session 2, did a lot of the improvement in treatment, the measured improvement, was that seen between that session 2 and 3 or whatever? These are all the sorts of questions in the fullness of time that we can sort of pursue. That's just flipping it around the other way, looking from the smallest to the largest. And finally, to goals. Now, you've probably heard me banging on about goals over the years. Right from the get-go with Pragmatic Tracker, we've always had a section about capturing goals, but I've been on a fair campaign to increase the use of that. And a lot of people have really got into this now. And so the idea with goals is a bit like problems, getting a label for a goal. So the Bill Andrews words for this are along the lines of, John, we've got 6 sessions. Or you're hopefully you're going to come and see me for the next period of time. What's the most important thing that you need to see change taking place on, so the work we're doing together is making a difference? The idea being to allow John to go on an internal search and think, okay, how will I know that the work I'm doing with Bill is making a blind bit of difference to me? And John might say, if I could just get on better with my partner. Great, John, to get on better with partner, there's the goal. Tell me, if 0 is the worst that could possibly be and 10 is the best, where are you today? And he says 2. Great, I've got a label to get on better with partner, and I've got a score 2. And so I then might say, so John, what else is there on the menu that you want to see improvement taking place on, so the work we're doing together is helping? And he might say, I could just get a night without flashbacks or whatever it might be. And again, scoring the goal and then capturing the goal. Now, what you're doing with this is you're building up what is called an ideographic measure. So measures like CORE, GAD-7, PHQ-9, PCL-5, these are all nomothetic measures. Hard for an Irishman to say that. Nomothetic measures, because they're standardized instruments that are the same every single time. But they don't tell you necessarily about this particular client's journey that they want to go on, that they will know that they've made improvements according to their own criteria. So that's ideographic, when you're building a measure bespoke around that particular client, if you like. And that's what the goals feature allows you to do. And then you can modify that as time goes on. You can switch goals off when they're already achieved, or if they're simply too ambitious, they don't need to be put in their face at the moment to score. And then the client scores it like a normal measure as they go on. So I just wanted to show you some of the things that have come up about this, like to lower anxiety levels, to manage rage, to sleep better, to get out of bed, to use public transport, look after herself, this type of thing. One thing I was pointing out to the therapists about this is that there's a skill, you know, like anything new, there's a skill to doing this. Because what you've got to remember is the goal, you're looking for the client's words in the first person, because when it's represented to them to score at a subsequent appointment, it needs to be them reading about the goal they set themselves. So this isn't like about the therapist setting goals for the client or anything like that. And I was also pointing out the difference in words. Like if you see, oops, sorry. Oh, here we go. So to meet up with friends is better than simply family, because if the client looks at, you know, how are you doing in your goals, in the goal you set for yourself, and they just see the word family, that's like more of a nominalization. It's maybe hard to unpack what that actually means. Whereas a definite achievable goal, like a SMART goal, like to meet up with friends, is specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time limited. My words, like I'm saying. So where are you in terms of achieving that goal, you see? So it's important to get the language right around that. And there were 17 clients with a first goal with a pre-score, and 16 had a final score. And the average score was at the beginning was 2.919, and at the end was 7.53. A huge shift. So this is like the clients defining the criteria under which they're going to judge the success of the therapy. And as you can see here, this is a colossal improvement in their average scores over time. So various hypotheses I have about this is the magnitude of change will be similar regardless of the instrument. So we've seen that regardless of whether you look at PRN14, Core10, whatever, the change is there everywhere. The instruments with a more orientation towards anxiety might show a higher effect size because they're more specific to anxiety. And as we saw shouting out from the problems section, anxiety and anger were really big for this client group. And an instrument that's more general to well-being might show a smaller effect. So the PRN14 is looking at improvement in well-being, but remember, this is only over a short span of time, a couple of months of a treatment time. And my extended hypothesis about that will be that those clients that we're lucky enough to get follow-up data from will show even more improvement in PRN14 over time as they're re-engaging better with life, etc. And the measurement of goals will demonstrate change in parallel with other measures, and the nomothetic and idiographic will complement each other. And that's all being borne up by the evidence we're seeing. We're seeing these big changes, pre-treatment score in PL5, improvements on the PRN14, and on the goals, the changes in the different goals as well. And the effect size of PRN14 on the goals is reversed there because they're going up with improvements. So I just switched them around the other way. So you could see in all cases, no matter what we're measuring these clients with, the effect sizes are very large indeed, all greater than 1. So I'm just going to go past that. So that really, the take-home message to the therapists were, you know, keep going, very well done, and maybe try to get little improvement in the language around goals, etc. Okay, so let me just come back to you guys now. How are we doing? Okay, that took about just over 20 minutes, so not too bad. So I just want to open up now to any questions, comments, observations, or anything else, anything you want to bring up at all. Just wave at me, or so I could see. Judith, great.
It's just regards to the goals and the problems. I know there's nothing you can do about this, though, but I don't imagine. But one of my clients noticed when we were in a session that they'd scored, you know, that you just mentioned the goal, one goes up, one goes down.
Yeah.
So the higher, the better on one, and then the higher, the worse on the other. and they had actually got it the wrong way round.
Yeah.
I don't think there's a way around that though.
There's not.
No, but the fact that when we were looking for what it was, because generally I send them out electronically, of course, but we did a Zoom session and they'd forgotten to do it beforehand. So we did it together on the screen. And that's when we highlighted that they'd misinterpreted it in the past.
Yeah, actually, that's a very interesting point. So the thing is that a problem is like, what's the worst the problem could be? Like 10 would be the really bad problem, 0 would be the problem solved, right? Whereas the goal, what's the full achievement of the goal is 10, you know? So it's the antithesis, isn't it? Now, in the protocol for the study, I actually it's not a requirement of the therapist to score the problems. What I was trying to achieve with the problems is to capture the problems, to capture the word for the problem and the length of time it's been a problem, right? But I didn't want to complicate matters by actually asking people to score the problems and the goals. But what's happened is, I mean, it's actually very good because of the way Pragmatic Tracker works, it's easy to end up ticking the box for problems, which means clients will see those problems as presented. And they're scoring them anyway. For the most part, it seems to be people are okay with it. I think that the point there is to just keep your eye on it. And if you notice that seems completely the opposite way around projects, but you go back to the client and you check. And of course, you can go in then and make adjustments with the client's permission.
Yeah, which is what we had to do in the end. We had to go through them and check.
Yeah. So I hope that's making sense to everybody. That's got a lot of detail there. But William.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Just a couple of quick questions. Sorry, I signed in late. I had difficulty. GAD-7 measured only one thing. Was that trauma?
Anxiety.
Anxiety.
That's
and my other question is on the feedback form. Why is it time sensitive? Because some clients we need to chase and they don't do it and then they eventually do it.
The reason it's time sensitive is because when it wasn't time sensitive, you could end up with getting feedback about the wrong session. So if what we've done is we've made it so that an outcome measure that typically goes out before an appointment, it expires, the link expires after 3 days, because you're wanting the outcome measures to be associated with that particular session. Now, after that particular session, you're wanting feedback about that particular session. But we do allow the feedback, it stays alive for 6 days. The link stays alive for 6 days. On the assumption that if you've ended up in a weekly arrangement, if the clients are coming week in, week out for their appointments, that if it expires after 6 days, it won't get associated with the next session. That's basically why, you know. Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah, perfect sense. My next question is, I didn't do the feedback after each session. I did an ultimate feedback simply because so many companies now ask for feedback, you get sick of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I did a final one, and of course they were both late, or I was late out sending it.
Yeah.
So they physically have done one for me. Is there any way that I can feed that into your charts?
Into your charts, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, into the overall survey.
Yeah. So if that measure was selected on the left side of the session record, it'll be there, and you can click on the little triangle, and it'll drop down, and you can insert the scores if you've got it from paper or whatever. You know, that's how you insert things from paper anyway. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Is that got everything, William, for the moment? Yeah, great. Raina.
I just wanted to say, that goes with that. I forgot to send out the ARM one, that one, the feedback, and so I just changed the session date to now, so I could then it would be live again, and I could send it to him.
Yeah, that's a good trick, Raina. You're on the ball. You're on the ball. So what Raina is pointing out here is that if some time has gone by and there's something that you wanted to get the client to fill in, but now you know that link will have expired. If you temporarily edit the appointment to change the date of the appointment to like today, that link will then be live again. you get the client to fill in the measure, and then when you've got it filled in, you can go back in and edit the appointment again back to the correct date. That's a very good trick, Raina. Well done.
But I had a question then for myself too. It would be, this is not really specific to this, but you know how we can upload documents or files in the client profile?
Yeah.
I wish that you could do that in each session, because sometimes I'd like to just be able to put my written notes onto that session, like an upload, so that I don't have to then transcribe it and type it out. Is that something that you'd ever consider adding as a feature?
No. The thing is that you don't put your notes into the notes place in
No,
the
I generally do, but sometimes I feel like if I've got too many clients, I just would like to be able to magic my written notes onto it rather than having to type up notes, like my handwritten ones.
Oh, your handwritten notes.
Yeah.
So you'd like to have them, yeah.
Or like if I've done, like we've done pictures or
Oh yeah, I see.
things like that.
Yeah.
That it'd be nice to be able to have that.
Yeah.
option.
I'll put it on the wish list.
Okay.
It's unlikely, to be honest with you. To be honest, we for a lot of organizations, we switched off this whole thing about being able to upload documents at all.
Okay.
Trouble is, it's from a GDPR point of view, it's a vulnerability, because if you have documents that are uploaded, then they can be downloaded, and then they're, let's say your confidential client notes related to one of these clients, and you can download it. And now it's not to say you won't look after it properly when it's on your desktop, but it's now on your desktop as opposed to being locked inside Pragmatic Tracker, if you like.
Right. Yeah.
So that vulnerability. So we're reluctant to expand on that any further than it is. So I'm sorry, for the moment you'll have to pop them into the profile section.
Right.
Great. There was something in response to what William was talking about, the frequency of giving out feedback, using a feedback measure with clients. When do you think is the most important time to get feedback? Which session?
I would say the first one.
Correct, exactly, because you've just met this client. You're hoping you're building rapport, building the relationship with them, but giving them a voice right at the very beginning to provide honest feedback to you about how things are is hugely validating for them. And the generally worldwide, the most frequent time for clients to drop out from treatment is after session 1. So if you were going to choose a time to get feedback at all, it would be, and you only wanted to do it even once, I would say after the first session is the most important thing. There's an interesting pattern as well. When therapists are good at getting feedback, and when I say good, it's not just a question of sending out the measure, it's like the explanation to the client. After the session today, we'll ask you for some feedback. And the reason for that is because it's really important for us to be on the same page together, for you to know that you're able, the way we're approaching working is a good fit for you and all of that. And it's an opportunity for you to think about the session and reflect that back to me. So it's not a judgment thing or anything like that. It's your honest feedback is hugely valuable. Now, the therapists who are good at soliciting honest feedback from the clients will often be scored lower. Because the client is being honest with them. They won't be down at 4, but they might mark them at 8.5 or something on this approach is a good fit for me, which then leads to discussion with the client at the next subsequent session about that feedback. And all of this is building the alignment between the therapist and the client. So when there's a pattern of improving scores on feedback measures across a course of treatment, that is typically associated with better outcomes generally as well. So that's just an important aspect of feedback. It's very nice to get feedback, and 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10, that's great, makes you feel good, the client loves you and all the rest of it. But that's not really what it's about. In fact, it's getting that honest feedback about, you know, is there something missing from the session? Is there something I haven't got out yet or whatever like that is really important, you know?
And Bill, I remember Ivan saying feedback makes you a better therapist as well. And I
absolutely
agree with that.
Oh, yeah. And Ivan said that, so it must be true.
Exactly.
Yeah, great. Okay, so anything else that anyone has to bring up? Is there anything you're struggling with Pragmatic Tracker? Or is there anything that is puzzling you or that is awkward or?
I'll just butt in while everybody's thinking. I've had a client recently with a bereavement issue.
Yeah.
And I didn't feel there was actually a outcome measure that really was appropriate, to be honest, for bereavement.
Yes. Yes.
We used the core 10.
Yeah.
And it was a traumatic bereavement.
Yeah.
So technically the IES, but is there anything else out there that, I mean,
there probably is. I'm sure there's.
I don't want to add more, to be honest. I don't want more measures.
No, I mean there's probably a wealth of, you know, if you looked at services that deliver. In fact, years ago, I was involved with the building of a measure around grief and bereavement, and the name of it has gone right out of my head now. But I know I'll have a look for it afterwards and see if I can find it. You probably have it somewhere. But a way to work around that, if you've got some theme going on that you just feel, oh, how do we look at change taking place on that? That's a really good way to use the problem section, for example, you know, to sort of say, well, these are the things that are going on for this particular person, you know. And if we see change taking place on these criteria, so you can use the problems or the goals section in a creative way there, maybe to help with that, you know. Very good. Okay. Raina.
One of my clients was very happy about having the access to the problems measures, because I know you said that you weren't asking for us to measure that, but because of the core 10 panic question being like there's not much between like not at all and then whatever the first one is, I don't have it memorized. So he was like, I had one panic attack this week and I was able to do 7-11 breathing and it went away, but I didn't feel like that was well reflected in the 10 options, but I was really happy to be able to put it as a 1 on the.
I see. That's interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a chap called Duncan Lowe. He developed a system called goal-based outcomes, and I came across his work a few years ago. He wrote a book with Mick Cooper about goal-based outcomes, and he's been doing this for years, all on paper. And I realized that Pragmatic Tracker was presenting goals in a very similar way to goal-based outcomes. So I worked with him to get his approval, basically, that the way Pragmatic Tracker presents goals is now an exact replica of his goal-based outcome system. And of course, the beauty of that is that it gives it a much more solid empirical basis because he's written books and papers and been doing this stuff for a long time, you know. So it solidifies the empirical scientific basis of working with goals in this sort of way. And I think we're going to have a very, very rich data set, you know, when we have these 100 clients, to be able to discuss all of this in academic papers. My hope is when I can find the team of people who are going to write all this sort of stuff. So any volunteers, please come forward. But yeah, so that's good. Okay. Gosh, don't tell me we've exhausted ourselves.
I'll just keep talking if nobody else wants to. Just a comment for Raina, because I've recently started trusting Pragmatic Tracker until yesterday to actually do my notes on there. So when I was doing paper, I didn't do it twice, just kept my paper notes filed. And then of course you can just tick on Pragmatic Tracker what you've done and maybe just put a brief line rather than you're making too much work for yourself. You're writing them out, then typing them again, I thought. unless that just works for you.
No, I mean my written notes are kind of like scribbly and they wouldn't be good, but sometimes I just like to have that there.
I mean, the good thing about not having paper notes is if you're working at different venues, you don't have to take confidential files with you. You can just log on. So people that didn't hear at the beginning, the problem I had with Pragmatic Tracker last night, well, yesterday, it wouldn't actually send me the link, so I couldn't actually access it at all. Which wasn't an issue yesterday. I didn't have any clients. I wanted to check the one I've got today had done their questionnaire, but luckily we've resolved it, but we don't know why that was.
Just in defense of Pragmatic Tracker, it wasn't that Pragmatic Tracker wouldn't send you the link, it was the cursed thing wouldn't arrive in your inbox, which is to do with filtering of emails. Pragmatic Tracker will have sent the link out without a doubt. That'll be the you know. It's not that. It's the problem with email as a technology is that all of the time, due to the vast billions of spam messages coming out, email providers are constantly changing their filtering criteria. So what happens is if they see something that might be potentially suspicious, they'll just send it to junk or spam or completely delete it altogether, you know. So that's happening more frequently, and that's why. And then often it rectifies itself. So a few weeks ago, a couple of therapists who had a BT internet email address were struggling with this. They just weren't getting the codes, and so I just had to switch on temporarily the SMS for them, and that did the job. But within a couple of weeks, it sorted itself out. So the algorithms change again, you know. So that's sort of what it is, really. So it's not poor old Pragmatic Tracker.
Oh, right, okay. I am still encouraging supervisees and colleagues to use it. And talking of supervision, I'm using it for supervision now. Just putting that out into the room, really, and finding that really helpful.
Are you? That's great.
Yeah, I've got a visual list. I've got one of my supervisors on a screen, actually. So I won't name and not shame them, but I'm hoping they found it helpful. So you're also getting a link before your session to set what your goals are as well for the supervision session, which I'm finding really,
Oh, great, yeah.
Just to jump in, it's me that's the
Thank you, Claire.
the supervisee, and I do find it useful, actually, Judith. And Bill. So yeah, I think it's a great idea, and it's a nice little, I think, reflection tool for yourself before you go to supervision to have a little look at yourself and how you're feeling. So I found that useful so far. So yeah, great.
Yeah, because I'm using the emotional needs, which is optional because some people don't want to fill that in, but it's a good way of checking in on our own well-being and self-care.
Indeed.
Yes.
Now, you've just reminded me of something else that I wanted to tell you that I get asked about fairly frequently. So if you can bear with me for 1 sec, I just want to show you something. So I'm on the live HGI site, and look at all these dots, and look at all these cases. These are closed cases, 3,462, and you can see the vast range of measures that have been used. But I want to show you something. I want to just turn them all off for a second. Curses. It's logged me out. Sorry, just 1 second. Let me get back in here. Too much time went by. Autofill. Hate that. Right. Come on. Close cases. Scatter chart. Slow internet. There we go. Turn that off and turn this on. Come on. Yes. Right. I'm back again. So what I've got selected here is just the PRN 14, right? And there's 1,826 cases and an effect size of nearly 0.9. Now, you might remember on the PTSD resolution study, the effect size of the PRN 14 was still large, but not quite as large as, for example, GAD-7 or something like that. And the reason for that is an anxiety-specific measure, 7 questions, all focused on anxiety, is likely to show more change in treatment than the more general type of questions that are involved in the PRN-14. But nevertheless, the movement that's taking place is very respectable. But this is very important for Human Givens perspective, because the PRN-14 is aligned with the Human Givens theory and Human Givens model, etc. Now, a question I often get asked is, well, what about the poor ENA, right? The ENA has been around for years, obviously. Now, I want to show you something. Bear in mind, 0.86, right? Almost 0.9, as with all these 1,800 cases here. I'm going to turn off the PRN-14 for a second, and I'm going to turn on the ENA, which is there. And let it load. Now, this is nearly 500 cases measured with the ENA. Now, notice the effect size is 0.53. And yes, there are more dots to the right side of the line, but they're not as far away. And there's a lot of dots on the left side of the line. This is clearly demonstrating what has always been my point about this. The ENA is very useful as an assessment instrument at the beginning of a course of treatment to understand what needs are not getting met, etc. But across a course of treatment, it's simply not sensitive enough to change. And what you don't want to end up with is a measure built around needs and resources and stuff like that, but that's not actually showing change across the course of treatment. It might show a far greater magnitude of change across 12 months, but not over a typical course of treatment, 4 sessions, 6 sessions, whatever it might be, that's over some weeks. So this is why I've been going on about this for years. And in fact, this Sunday night is the deadline for a paper. I've been trying to get a paper published about the PRN-14 for years and have had great difficulty, but I have had this paper accepted subject to edits that have to be in by before Monday morning. So I'm hoping eventually that this will be published. But that was a point I wanted to make, that the ENA is fine as an assessment instrument, but not a good instrument for measuring change across the course of treatment. I got that out.
I'm wondering, Bill, if that is the same thing as quite often I'm saying to clients, if I'm using the ENA, ones that are scoring low, you don't have to get them up to 5, 6, 7 to feel better. If you move it up by 1,
yeah,
that'll help you feel better.
That's
so
right.
Is that the same thing, that the way they're measuring and how sensitive they are?
Yeah,
I suppose one's about change.
I mean, the thing is that what you would like to think is that regardless of the instrument that you're working with, you're going to show similar magnitudes of change, So the idea being that a reduction in distress will be matched by an improvement in well-being and functioning and getting your needs met and all the rest of it, So what you sort of, an instrument is more valuable if it is more closely associated with other instruments. But that's not to say that there aren't other reasons for using the measure and having those discussions, about those small movements on the ENA, It's more a question of the reason for what. But I guess my take-home message about this is the ENA wouldn't be a good tool to use to display the benefit of your work in the aggregate, because it's just not, it doesn't move enough, it would make you look less effective, basically. That's it, I'm doing a lot of talking here.
Yeah, and so am I. And I was going to say to that, that's probably why for supervision it's fine, because I'm not measuring.
Yeah, exactly. You're interested in, exactly. As an assessment tool, it's absolutely fine. Yeah. Great. So who amongst you are pretty recent to all this carry on, this pragmatic tracker stuff and everything? I'm curious to know some names there that Claire.
Yeah, I've only just started using it again frequently. a few years ago I had been using it. But so yeah, I am quite new to it. And I do have a question actually. So when we're setting our measurements, which one should we set as the primary measure?
Yes.
Should I know this? I feel like I should know the answer. It's very
Well,
obvious.
well, that's a great question, actually, and it's a bit of a complicated answer. For many, many years, we've way back in the day, back in 2006-7, we did this study in Luton, and we used Core OM 34 question measure and Core 10. And so we use Core OM at the beginning, and then Core 10 session by session, and Core OM at the end. That and the subsequent 5-year data analysis demonstrated categorically that the Core 10 instrument showed similar psychometric properties to the Core OM. And so for many years, we've used the Core 10. The human given therapists have used the Core 10, right? Now, the challenge with that for us is that I think Core 10 is a great instrument and very simple, 10 questions, etc. Easy to use session by session. Add the scores up, you get, full amount. Great. The challenge with it is that the vast volume of data out there in the big bad world in the UK is IAPT data, and IAPT use as their standard instruments GAD-7 and PHQ-9. So GAD-7 is anxiety, PHQ-9 is depression. Now, the story behind this is quite unsavory because GAD-7 and PHQ-9 were designed, believe it or not, by scientists working in Pfizer Chemicals. And Pfizer Chemicals designed originally GAD-7 and PHQ-9 to encourage doctors to diagnose anxiety and depression because, of course, they had the pharmaceutical intervention to sell the drugs, basically, So the history behind the choice of GAD-7 and PHQ-9 by IAPT is quite political and all of that. And I have always been very reluctant. I bet you never thought you were going to get an answer this long, Claire, did you? I've been very reluctant to steer the human givens fraternity, if you like, away from using Core 10 as their sessional tool. However, as you can see in the PTSD Resolution Project, we're measuring with Core 10 and GAD-7 and PHQ-9 because what I want to be able to do is to show, look, it doesn't matter if you measure a client with Core 10, GAD-7 or PHQ-9, it's all the same. Right, the short answer, Claire, is use the measure you're happy with. I would say use the one that you're most comfortable with on your session by session basis. And if you're comfortable with Core 10, for example, as that, then by all means use that. So that's a long and a short answer for you.
No, that's great. Thank you. That's brilliant.
Okay.
Bill, can I add to your short answer? Well, we don't have time. And then I would also adapt, so if I've got somebody that's clearly trauma, I would use the IES as my primary measure, but mostly it's Core 10. But because obviously the PHQ 9 and the GAD-7 have come in, but what we sometimes I feel like there's too many questionnaires. That's why I don't want to.
Oh, without a doubt.
Yes.
I mean, where I'd like to get to really is to say, for me personally, in my own clinical work, the stuff I like the most of all is the PRN-14 and the Core 10, because I've got PRN-14 is orientated around the human givens, bedrock, and then the Core 10 is a generic measure of distress. And those two, I think, work very, very well together. So it would be nice, as a result of all this Herculean effort that goes on, to be able to get to the point to say, look, we've been doing all this measurement and we want to rationalize all of this and make it really simple and use these as the standard ones to be recommended. But Judith, you're absolutely right. I mean, and that is another fair point, that if the client you're working with is presenting primarily with trauma, it makes sense that you're going to look at how that trauma is improving across time, And I mean, in terms of extraction of data and data analysis, the fact that a measure was used as a primary measure doesn't make any bit of difference to that at all. That the primary measure is the idea of the measure that you want on your client list page that you can see the changes taking place on. that brings your attention to it. That's what it's all about, really, you know. So so use the one that you feel is the most beneficial to you with that particular client, I would say, is the answer. Great. Okay, guys, it's 10:58. Oh, Rada, have you something? Yeah.
One quick question. How come it counts the screening as a session on the PTSD Resolution Pragmatic Tracker?
Well, what do you mean it counts it? What?
Like when, you know, when it says number of sessions.
Yeah.
It really confuses me that the screening, like that the PTSD resolution is counted as a session, because I think
so
I've not had 8 sessions with them.
No, that's right. So because the way Pragmatic Tracker is built, in order to create a screening event, it is a session, right? But it's not a treatment session. It's not one of the, you know, 6 sessions or 7 sessions or whatever like that. That starts when they come to you for assessment.
And if we've got a supervision that we have on that client, and then we make a session in there for that and keep those notes on there, does that get counted or not?
Well, it doesn't. It would get counted if you just looked at it. It'll say, oh, there's another session written in there. But eventually, in terms of the data extraction and analysis, that will all be controlled for and etc. You know, But it's simply the way the software is built that, you know, when there's an event that takes place, it's captured in that way with a date and all the rest of it, you know. Okay,
that makes sense. Thank you.
Okay, good. Oh my God, I need to go down and lie down in a dark room after all that. Well, listen, it's just coming up to 11 o'clock. So that was great. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you found it interesting. Thank you very much for turning up. And I'm sure anyone who watches that afterwards will hopefully get a level. We covered an awful lot of material there. So that's great. If at any time in the future there's anything in particular you want to see covered, I mean, it's probably most likely that in another few months, I'll do another round of these sessions, and that will be reporting on maybe 9 months or 12 months data from PTSD resolution. I mean, this is a huge effort to bring about this study, and it's involving a lot of people, and I'm very grateful to all of the therapists. So and I know some of you are here today. So thank you very much for all the hard work you're doing. And but I'm very optimistic that it will be a sort of a vanguard for human givens generally, and it also will set a sort of a template for how to go about research and evaluation more generally, going further down the track as well, you know. So thank you very much. So I will say goodbye, and lovely to see you all, and happy Christmas if I don't see you before.